What if the Queen of Naboo became the Queen of Darkness? Betrayed by the Jedi, patient broken by Anakin's fall. Padmé Amidala died. She rises, but not as a senator, not as a mother, as a Sith. Wielding the dark side, she manipulates the Empire from the shadows. Even Darth Vader fears her return. And now her children must choose, stop her or join her. This is the untold path of Darth Padmé. Padmé Amidala stood on the balcony of her safe house on Polis Massa, holding her newborn twins close to her chest. The cries of the infants echoed in the sterile room, but Padmé's heart was quiet and broken. Anakin Skywalker, her husband, her love, was gone. Not dead, worse. He had become something else, something twisted, something dark. Padmé had seen it in his eyes on Mustafar. The fury, the betrayal, the power. She had gone to him with hope and left with nothing but pain. The galaxy she fought for was crumbling. The Republic had fallen. The Jedi were hunted like animals. And Anakin, her Anakin, had become Darth Vader, the very blade used to destroy everything she believed in. Tears streamed down her face, not from weakness, but from rage. The Jedi had turned their backs. The Senate was poisoned with fear, and the man she had loved had chosen power over peace. His hands trembled, not from sorrow, but from a growing strength she did not understand. Something whispered to her in the shadows of her grief. You were never meant to be a pawn. The voice was not her own. It came from within her mind, smooth, cold, and ancient. You are still powerful, still vital to the galaxy's future. Padmé didn't push it away. She listened. Her sorrow slowly melted into something darker, stronger. Her love had been twisted, and now, so was her purpose. She had fought as a queen, as a senator, as a wife, but none of that had saved the galaxy. Perhaps it was time to fight as something else. She looked down at her children, Luke and Leia. They were her light, but if the light could not protect them, then the dark might. The Force began to swirl around her, colder than before. She no longer felt like Padmé Amidala. That name belonged to the woman who once dreamed of peace. Now she would become something new, not to destroy the galaxy, but to seize it, to shape it, to make sure her children would never suffer as she had. Padmé was gone. Something far more dangerous had taken her place, and the galaxy would never be the same. The whispers in Padmé's mind grew stronger with each passing day. She no longer saw herself as the broken widow of a fallen Jedi. She was something more, and someone had noticed. A figure cloaked in shadows visited her in her meditations. He never gave a name, but his presence was undeniable. Powerful, patient. He did not speak like Palpatine. There was no deception, no grand speeches, only truth, aim and power. You have been betrayed by both sides, the figure said. The Jedi let the Republic rot from within. The Sith stole your love and left you hollow. Padmé didn't argue. She listened. Each word carved a deeper crack into the woman she used to be. The galaxy did not need hope. It needed control. She began to study the Force in secret, tapping into its darker currents, not to destroy, but to dominate, to reclaim what was lost. Her hands, once used to comfort and lead, now crackled with silent energy. She trained in the shadows, far from the eyes of the Empire and rebellion. And she learned quickly, faster than most. Her pain became focus. Her fear became strength. Her love, buried beneath layers of betrayal, was transformed into purpose. No longer Padme the Senator. No longer the lover of a fallen Jedi. She became the apprentice of a forgotten Sith Lord, one who had escaped the Emperor's grasp, waiting for the right successor. And now he had found her. She was not a replacement for Anakin. She was the evolution of him. While Darth Vader served, she would rule. Not as a puppet, but as a queen of the dark side. She crafted a new identity, hidden from both the Empire and the growing rebellion. To them, she was a ghost. But in the dark corners of the galaxy, her name began to spread. Whispers of a woman in black robes, eyes like fire, words that could turn entire systems. Some called her Darth Venatrix, the Huntress. Others feared to speak her name at all. Padme had stepped into a new destiny, not forged by fate, be chosen by her own will, and through that will, she would bring the galaxy to its knees. Years passed in silence, but not in peace. Padmé Amidala, now fully embracing her new identity as Darth Venatrix, moved with precision through the galaxy. Her influence grew like a shadow, unseen but always felt. She no longer relied on the Republic or the Senate. She relied on fear, on strategy, on her old allies would not recognize her. Bail Organa believed she had perished with the fall of the Republic. Mon Mothma still mourned her absence. Even Obi-Wan Kenobi, hiding with her son on Tatooine, thought her gone forever. And that was exactly what she wanted. In secret, Padme built a new network of loyal followers, former separatists who had lost everything, disillusioned Imperials who feared the Emperor more than they respected him, even Force sensitives who had survived Order 66. They flocked to her, drawn by her strength and vision. She offered them not just survival, she offered them purpose. Together, they formed a silent rebellion. But unlike the rebels of the Outer Rim, Padme's forces struck from within. They didn't hold banners or march in lines. They assassinated corrupt governors. They sabotaged Imperial transports. They sowed chaos inside the machine, all while whispering the name of their hidden queen. Darth Vader began to take notice. He felt something in the Force. Familiar, elusive, be painful. He couldn't explain it, but he knew someone from his past was not only alive, but powerful. The Emperor sensed it too. He warned Vader of a rising threat from the shadows, a Sith pretender gathering influence in the Mid-Rim. They did not know her name. Not yet. But soon the galaxy would, and Padme was ready. Sat alone in a darkened chamber aboard her flagship, the Obsidian Flame. Her children were still hidden, far from her grasp. Tira. But she felt them through the Force. Leia, strong-willed, fearless. Luke, untapped, but glowing with potential. Padme closed her eyes. Her time was coming. The Empire would crumble. The Jedi were already dust. And in their place, she would rise. Not as a savior, not as a tyrant, but as the future, one that only she could shape. Deep within the corridors of the Death Star, Darth Vader stood motionless. The cold metal walls around him vibrated with distant alarms, but his focus was elsewhere. He could feel her, a presence long thought lost, not a memory. Not a ghost, but late but real. Alive and powerful. Padme, the name, still struck something within the remains of Anakin Skywalker. The Emperor had warned him. There is a shadow growing, Palpatine said, his voice low and dripping with suspicion. She hides behind deception, but her power rivals even yours. Vader said nothing, but the truth burned within him. He had searched for her body after Mustafar. There was no grave, no ashes, only silence. And now the silence was broken. Reports from the mid-rim told of targeted strikes on Imperial supply lines, officers disappearing without a trace, whole systems turning away from the Empire, not toward the rebellion, but towards something else. Vader's hand tightened around the hilt of his lightsaber.
He needed answers, and he feared them. Padmé Amidala had once been his reason for everything. His love, his weakness, his undoing. If she had truly returned and embraced the dark side, then she was no longer the woman he remembered. She was something else entirely. A rival, a threat, and perhaps his reckoning. In the shadows, Padme watched the Empire tighten its grip. She knew they feared her, and they should, but her goal was not vengeance. It was reclamation. The galaxy had fallen into ruin. Palpatine ruled through terror. Vader served like a chained beast. The Jedi were extinct. Padme would rebuild from the ashes, not to restore what was lost, but to create something new. The Force whispered to her, deeper and clearer each day. She was no longer just a shadow. She was the storm, and she would face Anakin again. Not as his wife, not as his victim, but as his equal. Their paths were set, their destinies tied by fire and fate. And when they met again, only one truth would remain. Love is not always salvation. Sometimes it is the beginning of war. The throne room of the Emperor was silent. Darth Vader knelt before his master, the weight of recent events pressing heavily on his shoulders. Palpatine's eyes glowed with suspicion and anger. She moves through the galaxy like smoke, he hissed, striking without warning, turning systems in her favor. Even your former troops, clone remnants, speak her name. Darth Vader remained silent, but inside, the storm was building. Padme, alive, risen, and powerful enough to terrify the Emperor himself. She must be destroyed, Palpatine commanded. But Vader hesitated. The thought of facing her again, not as a memory, but as a force of darkness, made the man inside the machine stir. He had destroyed everything to protect her. Now she stood in the very shadow he once thought he ruled, and she had surpassed him. Meanwhile, aboard her vessel hidden in the outer rim, Padmé Amidala prepared her next move. Her influence had spread into the core. Corrupt senators, frightened governors, and loyalists from her past secretly joined her cause. To the Empire, she was still a myth. To her followers, she was destiny. She studied the Imperial structure, searching for weaknesses, patterns, routines, cracks in their walls. And always, her thoughts returned to Anakin. He was no longer the boy she loved on Naboo, nor the Jedi she supported during the Clone Wars. He was Darth Vader. But Padme knew something the Emperor didn't. Anakin Skywalker still lived, buried deep beneath the mask. And she would reach him, not to save him, but to challenge him. She would not beg for love or redemption. She would face him as an equal. Darth Venatrix against Darth Vader.
Wife against husband. Power against pain. Both twisted by the same war, but shaped by different truths. Her agents had discovered a key moment. A secret Imperial summit on Corellia. Palpatine would attend. So would Vader. It was the opportunity she had waited for. She would strike, not from rage, but from precision. Let the galaxy see who truly held the power now. The Emperor had stolen her future once. She would now steal his throne. And no one, not even Anakin, would stand in her way. The Imperial summit on Corellia was meant to display the strength of the Empire, but it became the stage for its greatest humiliation. Darth Vader, stood beside the Emperor as star systems pledged their loyalty once more. Imperial officers lined the marble chamber, unaware that the Force itself had begun to shift. A shadow crept across the room. Not from above. From within, the lights flickered. The air grew cold. Then, silence. Every trooper froze. Every officer turned. And from the heart of that silence, she stepped forward. Clad in deep black robes, face calm, eyes glowing with power. Padmé Amidala. No longer the senator. No longer the queen. She was Darth Venatrix now. And her presence was overwhelming. The Force swirled around her like a storm. Palpatine rose from his throne, fury in his voice. "You dare show yourself here?" Padmé didn't flinch. "I come not to beg, but to end this." The Emperor extended his hand, lightning crackling from his fingers. But before the bolts could strike, she caught them. Not with a saber, with her bare hands. And she absorbed them, every crackling wave of pain. Vader watched in silence. The woman he once loved was no longer fragile. She was fury made flesh. The room erupted into chaos. Her followers, disguised among the crowd, turned on the guards. Blasters fired. Lightsabers ignited. Screams echoed off the walls. And still, she moved forward, focused only on the Emperor. Palpatine unleashed his full rage. But Padmé was no apprentice. She had learned from loss, betrayal, and silence. And she was stronger for it. She struck with a single gesture, sending the Sith Lord crashing backward. Vader stepped between them, lightsaber ignited. Their eyes met. For a moment, time stopped. The pain, the memories, the love, all of it surged between them. Padmé whispered, "Anakin, is he still in there?" Vader did not answer, but the blade in his hand lowered. Palpatine screamed in anger, rising again. But he was no longer fighting just one. He was fighting two. The past had returned, and it would decide the future of the galaxy. The throne room shook with the fury of battle. Palpatine, the Dark Lord of the Sith, unleashed everything he had. Lightning flooded the chamber. The air smelled of scorched metal and burning stone. But this time, he was not alone in his rage. Darth Vader stepped forward, placing himself between the Emperor and Padme. The very act shook the balance of the Force. "You would betray me?" Palpatine roared, disbelief and fury twisting his face. Vader turned, his voice deeper than thunder. "You betrayed all of us." It was not Anakin Skywalker who spoke, or the machine that had once forgotten love. It was something new. A man awakened. Padmé stood beside him, her own lightsaber ignited, and pulsed with a crimson hue. But her grip was calm, her heart clear. This was not about revenge. It was about justice. The two, once lovers, once enemies, now stood side by side. The Emperor knew this was no longer a battle of strength. It was a battle of destiny. He attacked first, sending both of them flying with a wave of raw energy. But they rose, again and again. Each strike they delivered was sharper, each deflection tighter. Their movements were not practiced, they were instinct. Years of pain, separation, and power channeled into perfect unity. Padmé moved with grace, her every step filled with purpose. Vader struck with force, his every swing shaking the ground. Together, they became a story. Palpatine faltered. He hissed, spat, screamed. The throne room cracked around him. "You are nothing without me," he howled. Padme met his eyes. "No, we were nothing because of you." With a combined strike, their sabers collided with his own, shattering it in sparks. The blast sent the Emperor flying into the air, and then silence. He lay still, smoke rising, the room still. Padme and Vader stood there, breath heavy, hearts racing. They had done it. The Emperor was gone. But the moment was not one of victory. It was of realizing what came next would not be easy. The galaxy would not welcome them. But for the first time in years, they were free. Together. Not as Sith. Not as Jedi. But something entirely new. The galaxy held its breath. News spread quickly. The Emperor was dead. Whispers turned to shouts. Celebrations erupted in distant systems. Others, still under Imperial rule, waited in fearful silence. Who would rule now? What would come next? Padmé Amidala stood at the center of this uncertainty. Her robes were no longer the sleek armor of Darth Venatrix. She wore white, simple, clean, a signal. She was not a tyrant, nor a savior. She was something different. Darth Vader stood beside her, silent and still. His armor was squelched from the final battle. But something in his presence had changed. He was no longer bound by the Emperor's chains. He had made his choice. Not for the Sith, not for the Jedi, but for Padme. And in that, he had found a piece of himself again. Together, they addressed the galaxy. A transmission was sent from the ruins of the Death Star. Padme's voice was calm but strong. "The war is over. The Emperor is no more. The time for fear has ended." She offered peace, not through surrender, but through unity. Systems once divided by war began to speak to one another. Some leaders remained wary. Others saw an opportunity. A new alliance was born, not called an empire, not called a republic. Something new. Something untested, but hopeful. Padme refused the title of Empress. She would not sit on a throne. She created a council filled with voices from every corner of the galaxy. Former rebels, separatists, Imperials willing to rebuild, and even a few hidden Jedi, survivors of Order 66, stepped forward. Vader, still known as Anakin to her, chose not to lead. He watched from the shadows, haunted still by what he had done. But Padme saw the good in him. She always had. And in time, so would the galaxy. It was not a perfect peace. There were still those who resisted, still battles to fight. But the darkness that once smothered everything had begun to lift. And through it all, Padme walked forward, not as queen or senator or Sith, but as a mother, a leader, and the spark of a future no one could have imagined. The Mandalorians had watched the fall of the Empire from the shadows. They did not celebrate. They did not mourn. They observed. For decades, they had lived under occupation. Their traditions were stripped, their warriors scattered. But now the tide was turning. Padmé Amidala reached out, well, with a fleet, not with demands, with respect. She understood their pain, their loss, their pride, and they saw something in her that others did not. Strength, honor, conviction. Summit was arranged on Concordia. The old warrior clans gathered. House Vizsla, House Kryze, and others long thought lost. They came not for politics. They came to listen. Padme stood before them without guards, without a lightsaber. She offered no promises, only a vision. A galaxy no longer ruled by fear or rigid ideologies. A galaxy where the Mandalorians could rebuild, not as soldiers of fortune, but as protectors of their people. Bo-Katan Kryze stepped forward, her armor scarred, her eyes wary. "You're not one of us," she said. But neither were the Jedi, and they ruled all the same. Padme met her gaze. "I do not want to rule. I want to heal." There was a pause. Then Bo-Katan nodded. One by one, the clans pledged their support, not out of loyalty to a flag or to the Force, but to an ideal, to honor. Soon, Mandalorian ships began appearing beside her fleet. Beskar-clad warriors patrolled troubled sectors, defending civilians. They stood between smugglers and settlers. They helped rebuild cities shattered by war. And wherever they went, they carried a message. The galaxy was no longer the Emperor's or the Jedi's. It belonged to those willing to protect it, to defend peace with strength. Darth Vader watched these changes from afar. He remembered the wars with the Mandalorians, how fierce they were, how noble. Now they were allies, not by fear, but by choice. And he wondered if perhaps there was still a place for him, not as a general, not as a Sith, but as a guardian. In this new era, the past was not forgotten. Sarah had no longer noticed them. Together, with the Mandalorians at their side, Padme and Anakin had given the galaxy something it hadn't seen in generations. Hope.